Coming up next, Natalie Koussa, and she's talking podcast guesting for coaches. Natalie helps clients to grow their visibility through relationships based approaches like podcast guesting. She's a trauma sensitive visibility coach and strategist, and she supports leaders, healers, and guides to grow their visibility without losing themselves in the process. Her work takes a human first approach, and she helps her clients to grow their visibility through relationships based approaches. This show is what I know many of you have been wanting to learn more about, and I cannot wait for you to hear more up next.
Have you ever looked in the mirror and wanted something more? More in business, home life, relationship life? Say word if you agree. Word. In 2019, I created a business for coaches to market in this wacky way, virtual events. All with a 7 to 7 job. I'm a full-time nurse, by the way. And like you, there were just not enough hours in the day. My partner was feeling alone, and generally, this wasn't fun anymore. But then I realized I needed to build myself back up. Mind, body, soul, and even my business. So I created a show that does just that, interviewing all types of coaches, life, wellness, fertility, career, financial, wealth, and business. Join me on my journey with some of the best coaches who want to empower other coaches to live their best lives and build businesses that fulfill them. My name is Nicole Beatty, and this is Fempreneur Coach Connection.
Welcome to the show, Natalie.
Hey, Nicole, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited for this episode because, obviously this is a show we purpose into a podcast and people are listening to it. And I love the idea of talking more about how can people get on shows like mine. So I'm excited that you're here to talk to us about it.
Yeah, thanks. I could talk podcast guesting all day, every day. So thank you for having me.
Well, hey, we're excited to hear about it. Look, how did you get into this specific niche? Because there's all these different things, but this specific way of coaching, how did you get into it?
Yeah, so I used to be director of partnerships for a nonprofit. And so obviously in that role, it's all about relationships. It's all about,
Yeah.
I spent all day, every day pitching for something, whether it was
Mm,
funding for our
yeah.
nonprofit, whether it was media slots, and also in the relationship building that you need in order to be able to deliver a service that actually changes lives.
Mm,
Relationships with the people you're serving, relationships with other organizations and communities, all of that. So yeah, so that was like my kind of old life. And then really podcasts kind of changed my life. I
okay.
used to on my commutes to my job that I loved, but was also burning me out. And there was just
Mm,
this voice inside that kept saying, come on, like there's something else you're supposed to be doing, step towards the thing that is calling you. And I used to listen to these podcasts of women doing, well, what we're doing now.
yeah.
And it created this possibility inside me. And I thought, I used to be a social worker earlier on in my career. I've done family therapy training. I'm a people person, as we all are as coaches. And
Yeah.
then I discovered this world of coaching and thought, I think this could be my thing. So that's the two kind of merged together.
Yes.
And now I focus on visibility coaching.
So, I mean, it was a natural because you built relationships. I know with sponsorship, I've helped people get sponsors for their events, their virtual events. So I know that relationships are key. Where I go to a sponsor, they knew me. They may not have known my client, but they knew me. So they said, okay, let's be a part of it. So yeah, I totally get that. And we connect in the sense of I did the same thing. I went to work listening to podcasts. I had an hour commute both ways. I listened to podcasts endlessly of people who did this. And I was like, there's got to be more. I don't know if you know this. I'm a registered nurse. Every time I went to it, I was like, man, there's got to be more. There has to be more. And just so I definitely relate to all you just said there. So I absolutely love it. So here's one key thing that I really want to ask because you are the relationship based coach. So and building that, what is when you're trying to build a relationship or connect with someone, what is one of the first things you do to make the connection?
Yeah. So before I even reach out to try and make a connection, the very, very first thing that I do is get curious about who that person is. So one of the amazing things about so much of our work being online is people have their whole lives online for you to, have a look
Yes,
at.
they
So
do.
I'll spend some time scrolling through their Instagram feed, or I might join their free Facebook group and check out, and just see what their work's like and contribute to that first. And then once I'm really clear on, that we're values aligned and I really believe that I have something to bring, then I'll, DM them usually and say, hey, I really love your work. And I'll say something really specific that I know because I've been paying attention. It's not just hey girl, I love your work. It's hey, like,
Yes.
I know that you do this specific thing and I love your approach and I love the difference that you're making in the world. And then we go from there. So it's really focused on what the other person needs and values and wants and loves, and how you can contribute to that, rather than never starting with, this is what I want.
Yes.
It creates a totally different vibe and
Yes.
experience for both of you.
Please take heed. So, Natalie is in podcast guesting. I'm in doing virtual events and creating virtual events for my clients. And that is one of the key things, is that we're not automatically going saying, hey, I need you to be on this event and you do this for me. It's more, how can I contribute to you and your life? And then say, I love for you to be a part of this, and, that sort of thing. So reaching out, but knowing them, having a sense of, knowing them. It's super important when you're doing any pitching. So thank you for that tip. I hope everybody actually listens to that, because it's super important to have that connection first, getting to know them before you just latch onto them, in other words. So let's go into why podcast guesting, because you could do this, you could do that, you could do that. And a lot of people, they know podcast guesting is something they want to do, but they're kind of like, oh, okay, it's one of many. So why podcast guesting is super important for growing visibility as a coach?
Yeah, so I love podcast guesting. I think that, so as coaches, we're all people, right? Like, this is
Yes.
why we're coaching. We're good listeners. We're curious about other people, and beyond anything else, we want to connect with other people. So podcast guesting lets you do that. And if you're a coach, I'll put any money on podcast guesting playing to your strengths. It will help you market yourself and grow your visibility in ways that let you just show up as yourself. In ways that, so often I hear people say, I know I need to grow my visibility. Not enough people know about my work and all of that, but I hate social media. And social media just makes me feel icky. It feels really broadcasty. I don't know how to share the nuance of my work in ways that make sense. And I think that podcast guesting can solve loads of those problems.
Yeah.
When you're guesting on a podcast, it's not just that you're allowed to talk in your work, to talk about your work with a bit more nuance. It's that you're expected to. That's what makes the interview really interesting. And that's what helps listeners understand what makes your work distinct, and how they can, you can provide a mindset shift for listeners and invite them to think about something in a new way, or to take action in a slightly different way. So in some ways, it's almost like you're already coaching just by being a podcast guest.
Absolutely. And then people can also hear how you coach,
Mhm.
how you vibe with them. You vibe with people as you're listening to them on podcasts. So it definitely, I could see being really a client attraction system based on, how people are able to vibe with you on these shows, for sure. So, let's go to the next one, where you say how to create the internal safety to support you to grow your visibility without burning out or losing yourself in the process. What does that mean? How do I create what does internal safety mean? I guess is my question first off.
Yeah. So what I mean by internal safety is emotional safety and a nervous system that is staying within your window of tolerance. So, the
Okay.
kind of natural ups and downs of experience, that basically you feel grounded, you feel secure in who you are. And I think that when coaches, especially newer coaches, or coaches that are kind of moving to the next stage in their business, when they think about growing their visibility, very often I hear people jump to the how. They jump to the strategy. They're like, oh, I'll do a challenge where I go live on Facebook every day for 30 days, or I'll learn reels, or, any one of these things. And what I always say is that any of those strategies can work for you. Absolutely. I don't think any are better or worse in a kind of objective way. But starting strategy first sets you up to fail. It sets you up to work against yourself, because you're putting all of your faith in the strategy instead of the way that I support clients, and the way that I work in my own business is I move human first. And what I mean by that is I support clients to understand what their particular core needs are, how we can meet their core needs in their business, in how they show up, in how they grow their visibility. What do they find really fun? How do they naturally communicate? How do they want to show up for their business? And when we understand those things, then the strategy really effortlessly often just fits in to that human first approach.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, really focusing in on your clients and their needs. And then we start developing some kind of strategy based on that particular thing. I absolutely love that. So, as you are going through the process of pitching, and we're going to talk about that power pitch that you have, and I'm excited to go through that. But how do we not lose ourselves with, just trying to get on everything? How do we, when do we say enough is enough? Because, some people are just like one after another, like trying to get on all these podcasts. When do we say, okay, I'm doing too much and this is not going to be good for us?
I love this question. I think it's in two parts. The first part is only pitching to or appearing on podcasts, or any other opportunity that is really deeply aligned with you. So, for instance, me guesting on this podcast, a really significant chunk of my clients are coaches, and I'm a coach myself. So that automatically makes this both really interesting for me. It makes it valuable for the listeners. It ticks all your boxes, Nicole, of what you were saying you wanted from guests, all of that.
Yes.
And beyond that, I've been following you for a long time now, Nicole. I know about your work. Yeah, I've been following you on Instagram. We actually DM'd, I don't know, maybe a year ago or something, about appearing on events and things, and you were so generous in your response. So it's kind of all of those levels of making sure that the opportunities that you're going for are really aligned. And when you do that, you can do far less of them, because you're not taking this scattergun approach of, let me just be on everything and I'll talk to anybody that asks, and I don't know, it's worth a try. I'll just chat. You're doing much less of that. And what you're actually doing is just taking a breath, doing your research, showing up exactly as you are, knowing that your ideal clients and collaborators are very likely to be in the audience listening to you. So I would prefer that you're on 3 podcasts, 10 podcasts instead of 50. That's
love
very
that.
much my, yeah.
I love that. I love that. And quite frankly, when you start, looking out there and you say, what truly has my audience? Who really, what show really has my audience? You'll find that you'll probably take off a lot of people that originally you're like, I'm gonna try to get on this one, I'm trying to get on this one. And then you really dive into it and realize, oh, that's not my audience. And I'll also say this, your pitch will be much better, whether you're applying to be on the show or you're pitching the show. It will be much better if you're completely aligned and really, the audience is matched. So I totally feel that. Okay, let me shut up, because this is the part that I know that people are like, shut up, Nicole. Let's get to the power pitch. I know that, I'm excited to hear this. I know the audience is excited to hear the 3 elements to craft an unforgettable pitch. So I'm going to be quiet so Natalie can just do her thing now.
So before we get into this, I don't believe that there is such thing as a perfect pitch. That's not what you're going for.
Gotcha.
What I believe the 3 elements are. So we want to, and I'll talk about what they are in a bit more detail, but just to give you the
Yes.
outline.
No problem.
The first one is you want to open your pitch with connection, which will be no surprise because that's what we've just been talking about.
Exactly.
The second one is in the middle of your pitch, you want clarity, both on what you're asking for. So, you want to be really clear. I'd love to be a guest on your podcast. And secondly, what you would like to talk about and how it's valuable for their listeners.
Mm.
And then finally, the third element, you want to close with consent. And what I mean by that, well, yeah, I've gone into detail as I'm going now, but
that's fine.
What I mean by closing with consent is not emailing somebody or DMing somebody and assuming that they're going to say yes to you being on their podcast or being included in their event, but ending your guest invitation request or your pitch with a sentence that offers goodwill and that says, whether or not I'm going to be included, I'll continue to be a dedicated listener if that's true, or whether or not I'm a great fit for you at the moment, please keep me in mind for future opportunities. Something like that lets the host say no or say not now if now is not the right time for them without it being awkward. And what that does is it builds in connection, again, that we keep talking about, but it also opens the door for a longer term relationship. It switches the pitch from being a transactional, hey, I'd love to be on your podcast, what do you think? To being more of a relationship based, I'd love to be on your podcast, this is what I could bring. And also, if that's not quite right now, no worries. Like, let's stay in touch and see how we can support each other in the future.
Yeah, I love that. I love, because as soon as you said that, quote that, please quote that, y'all. She literally gave you the blueprint right there. That piece, it has the feeling of, I want to continue this relationship, no matter the outcome of this moment or what I'm saying, or, yes, being on your podcast is something I'm interested in, but it goes beyond that. It goes, I want to continue this whatever developing. I want you in my inner circle. It's a great way. And vice versa, podcasting, this works also with events. If you're trying to be on somebody else's event or try to get somebody else's on your event, it's all about leaving the door open for future of anything, not just this one moment. So I love that. Quote that, y'all. I love that. I love that. So, at that point, if someone, you kind of make this pitch to someone, you've made a relationship prior. Am I right in that? Or are you talking about this being kind of a cold thing?
So wherever possible, it's great to build a relationship first. That's always the best way to do it. And that can be really simple. It can be a DMs relationship on Instagram, or it could be somebody that you know through your networks, or that through, you have a mutual contact in your network. Something like that is always the preference. But if you're pitching for a podcast that you think would be a great fit and there's no obvious way to get to know the host, maybe they have a huge Instagram following and you have DM'd and never heard anything back, it's likely they just get way too many DMs yeah, exactly. It's nothing personal to you at all. Then I think you absolutely can send in a pitch without them knowing you. But that's when that opening of building connection becomes really, really important. Because the first thing that you want this person to feel and to understand is, this person, you sending in the pitch isn't just sending out 100 pitches and, crossing their fingers and hoping they'll get someone. This is a person that values my work and my contribution and who I am. And they know a bit about what my podcast is and who my listeners are and all of that good stuff. So then they're more likely to read the second paragraph. And, that's, it's just step by step by step. This isn't a kind of one and done or winner and loser type situation. It can't be if you're focusing on relationships.
Absolutely. Once you send that initial pitch,
Mhm.
are you following up? Are you maybe sending a DM? Hey, I sent email or whatever the case. How do you kind of do that follow up?
Yeah, I personally always follow up, and I encourage clients to as well. I'd say you can follow up twice.
Okay.
You want to balance between, sometimes as humans, we are just overwhelmed, or we have great
Yeah.
intentions and forget, or things drop to the bottom of our to-do list, whatever. So it can actually be really caring to receive a follow-up, and you think, "Oh, I did want them on as a guest. Thank you so much for reminding me. Let me come back to you." It doesn't
Right.
have to be a kind of nagging, sort of
Yes.
feeling to it. It can be really friendly and caring. And then if you still haven't, so I'd leave it maybe a couple of weeks between initially
Okay.
putting in the pitch and then following up. And then if you haven't heard still a couple of weeks later, I would follow up once more, and I'd perhaps do it in a different way. So if
Mm.
initially you emailed, maybe it's gone into spam for all we
Absolutely. And
know.
that happens.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it
That
does. It's
happens.
annoying, but it really does happen. So maybe try and DM them on Instagram, or just try to mix it up a little bit, so that perhaps you've picked a like a communication channel that doesn't really work for them. Try another
Yeah.
one, and that might just work a lot better.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. So, I know that you guys out there listening and watching, you have more questions that I possibly could even ask on this. So make sure you get in the comments and ask Natalie. We'll make sure she is there tagged so she she can receive all those questions, or DM her, and we'll talk more about how to get a hold of her. How do you work with clients, Natalie? How does that work? How do people get into your sphere and have you coach them?
Yeah, I've got two ways at the moment. One is a podcast guesting VIP day. So that's just you and me, just the two of us for a full day. And that takes you through. I use the leadership designs in my work, which are a trauma aware way of understanding who you are, how you communicate at your core, what your core needs are, all of that good stuff. So we always start there. And
Yeah.
that's what I mean by moving human first as well.
Love it.
Um, so we start there, and then together we develop your core conversation topics. We develop a bespoke pitch for you. I show you how to find aligned podcasts. We get to know your ideal client slash listener. We think about how podcast guesting can weave into your client journey, all of that good stuff. And then coming out in March, I also have a self-paced version of what used to be a live group program, which
Mhm.
takes you through the same elements, but much lower cost offering, and
Yeah.
it's self-paced, self-study. That's coming out in March. It's called the Pod Squad, and there's also going to be hot seat coaching that goes alongside it to help people with the implementation and to give a space. If you're working through and you've got a question, or you want my eyes on your pitch, or you're wondering, whether or not this podcast might be aligned for you, there'll be hot seat coaching that you can come and bring those questions to support you as you're moving through the content.
I love the pod squad is what you
Yeah.
just called it. I love that. That's so cute. Okay, so, definitely, especially that VIP day. I'm telling you, like, VIP days are where it is. And having somebody for an entire day or for a period of time really focusing in on you. I think that's an awesome deal right there. So, guys, let's get into our next segment. You guys know, with your best online business advice for online coaches after this brief break. Okay, you guys know this is the segment where we do living your best online business life, and that we ask our guests about what is their best online business advice. And so I asked Natalie, what is your best advice?
My best advice is to stop stressing out about growing your audience and focus on the people that already know you.
Oh,
So, yeah, you know, if you're a coach, the chances are that you need relatively few people to work with you over
yeah.
an entire year in order for you to create a thriving business, to love the work that you're doing, to see the impact that you want to have in the world, all of that good stuff. You know, you don't need an email list with thousands of people on it, unless you're selling courses or digital
Yes.
products. You know, that's
Yes.
a different business model. But if we're focusing specifically on one-to-one or group coaching, you need a smaller audience that knows you really well, trusts your work, and that you know really well. Because I think what happens is, especially kind of in the earlier stages, if people are struggling to sell as much as you know that they would like to be able to sell to have that kind of sustainable, thriving business, they look at the advice out there and think, okay, I need to grow my audience. You know, I need to think about Facebook ads or growing my Instagram or social media following. And that can work for sure, but it only works once you've already got your messaging dialed in and you already know who the people in your world are and how you can help them. And if you're not clear on those things yet, just inviting more people in isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. It's like if you threw a party and 20 people have arrived, but you were really hoping 50 would come, you're not going to spend the night like wondering where the other 30 are. You're going to spend the night like checking people have got drinks and is the music the right
Yes.
vibe? And
Yes.
having a small audience, I think, is a real gift, especially when you're at those early stages working out, you know, what do you want your offers to be? Even what do you want your niche to be? Who is it that you can help? You can spend time getting to know your audience, you know, the equivalent of what music do they like? What kind of
Yeah.
drinks do they want? You know, what's their vibe? So I think the advice out there can lead us to skip that bit. Whereas my experience from my own business and also from what I've seen in my clients' businesses is that spending time really, really getting to know the people that are already in your world will really help you, even when you are ready to start growing your audience and inviting more people in.
Oh, quote that. I'm telling you right now. That's great and can be used in so many different ways, the advice you just gave. You know, again, people focus on I got to get this million email list and all that sort of stuff. It's great for digital products, maybe group programs, but that human first approach, especially if you're doing one-on-one coaching, if there's a lot of interaction, just like you said, you don't need a million people on your list if you really take that approach. And I loved how you said, if you have 30 people, I'm focusing on what music do they like. That's perfect. Perfect right there, what you just said. I'm focusing in on what they like, the 30 people. I'm gonna serve the 30 people just as well as I would serve 30,000 people. So I really appreciate that and that advice for people. So let's connect. So this is a segment where we have our guests connecting with our audience, and our guests actually say who they want to bring into their inner circle. So, Natalie, who would you like to bring in your inner circle?
So the people that I want to serve in my inner circle are coaches that are curious about whether podcast guesting could be a great fit for them, or coaches that already know they would love to be a podcast guest. Maybe you've been on one or two podcasts, maybe you haven't been on any so far. Come, hit me up. I can support you to get really clear and really confident and to use podcast guesting to grow your business in a really intentional way. So that's kind of who I want to invite into my business.
Yeah.
And then the people that I'd like to be connected with, for me to contribute to their business are podcast guests, not guests, podcast hosts
Yes.
and event hosts that are so that they're serving coaches, maybe other service-based business owners, and they're interested in visibility or in trauma sensitive ways of honoring yourself as you grow your business. I would love to be a speaker or, contribute to a panel or come chat to you on your podcast. So please get in touch if that's you.
Absolutely. She has an array of information, as you've heard here. And, I'm excited to see what other things you have to tell on other podcasts and other events. Can you tell us what kind of topics? Obviously, you talk about podcast guesting, but anything specific within that particular topic that you talk about?
Yeah, so I talk about podcast guesting in relation to relationship building around your visibility. I talk a lot about how to grow your visibility if you've got a small audience. I think it's often the missing piece in the visibility conversation that I see kind of, in the online business space.
Yeah.
They're the two core things. And then I also talk about the leadership designs, which I mentioned briefly. They're a trauma-aware way of understanding who we are as entrepreneurs and what that means for how we exist in our businesses and how we create and how we communicate and show up. They were created by Sarah and Rachel Turner. Rachel's a leadership and business coach, and Rachel's a business coach, Sarah's a leadership coach, and together they created these leadership designs there. They transformed my business with me using them, which is why I then went on to get certified to use them with my clients. So really happy to talk about those as well.
Awesome. Where can we find you? Because I want people to easily get to you.
Yeah, so the easiest way is come find me on Instagram. It's just at Natalie Koussa, which is my name, and then an underscore. Or if you are wanting to know what your leadership design is, come over to my website, or if you're wanting to join my email list to know about future offers coming up, it's www.uncommon-people.com. And everything will be really clear how to do things when you're on the homepage.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I appreciate it. And for giving this valuable advice, because you really had many quotes today. When I say quote this, it means it's good. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicole. It's been great.
Absolutely. So I'd like to thank my guest for today's show, Natalie Koussa, for being a part of this and giving us some great information. We'd love to have you as a guest. So if you have an audience of online coaches and you want to speak to online coaches, I'd love for you to be on the show. Go to fempreneuronline.com/guest to apply. And at the end of every episode, we say, who's next? Cut. All right, so I bring her back on. So if you're watching this after the show, we have a little thing that we kind of bring everything together and make sure everything works well for the show. So, hey, here's an idea in case you want to do this for your show, and a little fun chat. So what I'll do is, Natalie, I'll get off of the screen and I'll mute myself. So that's your go time to do those. Leave a little bit of space in between each statement so I can edit.
I will, yeah. Great.
All
okay.
right, let me take my...
Hiya, I'm Natalie Koussa, and you're listening to the Fempreneur Coach Connection. Hiya, I'm Natalie Koussa, and you're watching the Fempreneur Coach Connection. Hiya, I'm Natalie Koussa, and we're talking about podcast guesting for coaches, only on the Fempreneur Coach Connection.
Beautiful. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Ending the stream right